Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this Torch Theatre's Knowledge Exchange event, Adventures in Digital, Making Performance in Lockdown. My name's Wes Williams. I'm Professor of French, an occasional theatre maker, and mainly for today's purposes, Director here at Torch, the Oxford Research Centre in the Humanities. At Torch, and through the Humanities Cultural Programme, we offer and support a wide range of cultural activity actions fueled by research. Knowledge exchange projects involve collaborations between researchers and external organizations and/or the public. Those organizations might be large, they might be individual artists. They're designed to benefit everyone involved, both sides of the exchange of knowledge, if you like. And through our knowledge exchange work with theatres and performers, we're constantly seeking new ways to enrich collaboration. This event, supported by the university's KE Seed Fund, was created to hear from people at the front line of challenges facing the theatre industry over the past year. In future events, we'll explore the heavy toll the pandemic has taken on venues and freelancers and ask what elements of digital performance we might wish to hold on to as we look forward to a future in which we can gather in person once more. Today, our focus is on the tremendous creative energy we've seen released online while theatre doors have been closed. Over the next hour, we'll listen in on two pairs of speakers as they discuss what it has been like to make and program performance during lockdown. There'll then be a short Q&A time within this initial webinar stage to the afternoon. Then at 1:30, we'll encourage all of you who can and who have the time to move to an informal discussion space. There you can quiz the speakers further and also share your own experiences of both making and watching digital performance. Do stay for the second phase of the exchange if you can, although we understand that not everybody will be able to. We want to hear and explore today then the very best of lockdown theatre, but also the challenges that all of us as theatre makers have faced over the last year or so. You'll also find a Slido link in the chat right now or very soon, which invites your further thoughts on whether people have been watching more performance over the past year or less, and so on. Throughout the hour, we'll be posting a number of other questions on this Slido link that's running a kind of poll around a number of different questions. We'll use them to animate the debate as we go along. Throughout the hour, we'll also welcome your questions to the speakers directly. Please type them in the Q&A box and we'll gather them up and ask later in the session. So that's enough housekeeping for now, and let's move to our speakers. Our first dialogue partners are Lucy Askew, CEO of Creation Theatre Company, and Dr Laura Jayne Wright, lecturer in English at University College, Oxford. I'll just pause while they both come on screen. Hello, Lucy. Hello, Laura. Hello. Allow me to say one or two things about you. So, Creation Theatre have been at the forefront of online performance. From the time machine, which erupted on Zoom after a cancelled run at the London Library in March 2020, through a virtual theme park adaptation of Alice in Wonderland, to most recently an online Wizard of Oz at Christmas. Creation, and there's also the Grimm stuff coming up very soon, isn't there? Creation collaborated with the Wellcome Centre for Ethics and Humanities on the Time Machine. And I know about the Grimm stuff, not leastly, and I want to put a plug in for this as well, because my little boy, who's 12, has absolutely adored being part of the online creation stuff that's going on week in, week out. And that's somebody who wouldn't be seen dead in a theatre otherwise. So more recently, through the Torch Theatres Fund, Creation have been working on a KE project with Dr Laura Jayne Wright, as part of an online production of the Duchess of Malfi, which opens later this month. Laura's research examines the historical performance and stage effects of early modern drama. Are you going to explain what early modern means, or shall I do that?
Yes, I certainly can do. So okay. We're thinking sort of 15th, 16th, 17th century.
Okay, thank you. I live in the early modern period most of the time as well. So, but for people who don't know what that means, it can be a strange term. So your particular research examines the historical performance stage effects of early modern drama, with a particular focus on sound, if I understand it right. And perhaps we'll hear a bit about that as well. That's enough from me. Over to you, Lucy and Laura. I'll come back when you give me the clear sign to do so. Thank you.
Great.
Hello.
Hi, Lucy. I was wondering if we could kick off by you telling us a bit more about Creation's work this year and about the digital rep, in particular, the rep company that I'm working with for Duchess of Malfi.
Yes, absolutely. This is strange for Laura and I because we are currently working on a production of Duchess of Malfi together. So we're talking all the time. So we're going to have to be very careful here that we don't get sidetracked into a discussion about colours of backgrounds or decisions in the show or wigs. So Creation has had quite an extraordinary year, really. I almost sometimes find myself saying we've sort of had an embarrassingly good pandemic. And I think part of that is actually because, you know, pre-pandemic for us as a kind of relatively small, you know, we're not court funded, we're not MPO funded, theatre company that exists primarily on ticket sales. It's always been really, really hard. You know, there's never been a year when it's been easy to balance the books. Like we're constantly, most shows don't make money. It's nearly impossible to get them to cover their costs. So we were coming from a background of actually it being really, really a real struggle to keep the organisation going and to kind of get a business model that actually meant that we could make the quality of work and achieve the artistic ambitions and the things, good things for the world that we would so dearly love to do. And then when the pandemic hit, we went online and within 3 weeks did our first digital production of The Tempest, and it went really well. And we've just had this absolutely incredible year where we've completely fallen in love with making digital work. I am so evangelical about the benefits of digital work. I could talk about it for hours. But one of the places that's led us to is we got a substantial amount of funding from Innovate UK, from their sustainable innovation round to support our digital transformation. And that really has 3 strands to it. One strand of it is that we are doing a report into the sort of sustainability implications of digital theatre. Our initial data shows there's a 94% reduction in carbon emissions associated with producing digital work. And that's mainly to do with reducing audience travel. The second part of it is we're building our own platform, Project Escape from Zoom. So we'll be able to produce shows not within a kind of conferencing format. And the third bit, which Laura sort of did a lovely introduction for me there, is that we have a rep company. So we have a rep company of 5 actors for 6 months who are currently just starting their 3rd month with us. So they made Brothers Grimm and they are now working with Laura on the Duchess of Malfi. And what that really is giving us the opportunity to do is, I mean, obviously employing 5 actors for 6 months at the moment feels like quite a big deal in itself and something that, you know, we're incredibly fortunate to be able to do. But it also means that rather than constantly having to train people on camera position and microphones and virtual backgrounds and making digital work, we can really start to build on each experience and each show and unpick different things and explore different kind of digital propositions with each piece of work, one of which is the Duchess of Malfi. So Laura, would you like to talk about how we've ended up doing the Duchess of Malfi this year?
Yes, absolutely. So I suppose this started last summer. We had been talking for a little while before last summer about putting on a production of Shakespeare and Fletcher's Henry VIII. And one of the things that I was interested in as a researcher, and of course you were as a theatre maker, is how to make this sort of spectacular history come to life, and big costumes and the kind of lavish setting. And of course this all fell by the wayside and we ended up moving into a digital space. But the capability of that space, the opportunity it presented, was so fascinating that we ended up escalating this to do another production from a very similar moment in history, which is Duchess of Malfi, which again, for those not familiar with the play, is a play set at court. It's really interested in beauty, but also the kind of aesthetics of violence, and the way that death is reframed as a beautiful thing, and also, of course, a very upsetting thing. So it seemed a sort of perfect next step, but also something that we could really make the most of in a digital medium. And certainly so far in rehearsals, that has been true. We have been finding that actually using digital space has given us more options, more chance to be creative than in any way hampering the decisions that we make. We're not sort of thinking, oh no, wouldn't it have been lovely to do this in theatre space? We're actually thinking, fantastic, we can play with effects, we can play with space in a way that wouldn't have been possible if we weren't using this medium.
Do you think, Laura, you would have like, if we'd talked about making it digital when we were first, so obviously Laura was talking about doing the Henry VIII project with us way before the pandemic. Do you think you would have felt the same way about the possibilities of digital way back then?
Oh, absolutely not. I think at the if we'd sort of pitched that, I think I would have said, well, what that does is it takes away any sense of intimacy, of audience interaction. It will be sort of distant and will be removed behind screens. When we did pivot, as we did so quickly, with sort of very little prep time at all to do Henry VIII online as a rehearsed reading, that certainly wasn't true. And when I've come back to creation nearly a year later, as I've said to you many times, Lucy, the progress that you've made in how you make digital theatre is so astonishing in such a short time that actually I'm really happy to be doing this. And it's also meant on quite a practical level that people you know, from all over the place have been able to take part in this, that I've been able to jump in and out of Zoom rehearsals in a way that even within the city wouldn't have been possible. I think I'd have been, you know, running all over the place if I'd been trying to get between teaching my college job and getting into rehearsals. So no, I've become a convert, but as you say, a really passionate one.
I think one of the things that like I've sort of really noticed is that it sort of enables us to, like, the audience is completely different. And actually, you know, I can almost give you some stats to substantiate that. Are people watching more digital theatre? Now, I don't know if people who are, you know, seeing a lot of physical theatre in a theatre are, but of our digital audience, the audience who are booking to see the shows are booking to see everything. So I was going through all their customer data yesterday, and they are booking every digital show that there is. But what's I find particularly interesting is that if we were doing Henry VIII as a rehearsed reading before in Oxford, I kind of know that I might struggle to sell that. I might get, you know, a certain number. If Laura helps us and boosts it with students, it might get a bit bigger. It might be a little bit of a hard sell. You know, it's geographically very limited. The niche of like early modern interest globally is enormous. They are a force to be reckoned with. Our Twitter feed, I'll daily go on there, and it's just all conversations between early modern and Shakespeare experts globally saying, oh, Duchess of Malfi coming up, when are you going? And like that you all know each other. It's fascinating. But I think it kind of sure that you can, and like Brothers Grimm is being promoted by the Horror Society, you know, and they're promoting it globally. So members of the Horror Society are globally reaching out and joining us. Our top booking postcodes now, if you look at our first digital show, the top 10 postcodes for booking were all OX postcodes. If you look at our booking data now, number 3 is Croydon. I don't really, you know, I need to dig into why Croydon particularly is adapting to digital work quicker than other places. It's Croydon, and Florida is number 5, and then number 7 is York. So there's still OX postcodes in there, but that's like a massive shift for a company that's been going in Oxford for 24 years.
And it is so exciting, isn't it, to have audiences who could never possibly have come before, and for them to be able to come as part of their evening. And I think that's something really exciting as well. The accessibility actually that is being raised by digital theatre, something I think both of us are really passionate about, that people who for financial reasons, for personal reasons, geographic reasons, whatever, couldn't come to shows, now can, in the sort of comfort of their own homes, just log in and be part of something that feels really special and really intimate. I think that's certainly my biggest takeaway, that far from feeling sort of isolated and distanced by a digital theatre, it's a really strong way to connect with people, which has just been fascinating. It's been a big part of my sort of output from this work. So our production has been funded by Torch, and as part of Knowledge Exchange. And of course, with that comes me asking research questions. What can I understand about this play through our work that I wouldn't have understood just reading it or kind of analysing it on the page. And that certainly has been part of it. What does it mean to be able to show theatre in such an intimate way? Even practically, you know, we can have characters move really close to the camera. We can see their eyes, we can see their lips moving in a really localized and often beautiful or unsettling way. And that's been fascinating for me, thinking about these plays.
I think as well, it opens up a kind of accessibility to making work. Like, you know, you can make work digitally faster and cheaper than you can possibly build an elaborate set in a theatre and light it and get the sound right and get the sight lines right and get the front of house offering right. And I think that kind of sort of accessibility, being able to go, let's make a show, let's, you know, Malfi's being made on a really small budget, and the quality of what's being created is just really, really exciting because of all the possibilities that digital is sort of presenting to us. But that enables us as artists to kind of pick away a bit more and have kind of slightly more academic inquiries at times than we've ever been able to do at creation, to be more artistically led, to be able to go, okay, well, Brothers Grimm, this is the thing we're investigating here. We really want to look at built environments for our cast. We want them to have their own little worlds they're engulfed in. We want to play with liveness and when things are filmed and when things are live and what that means to the audience. We want to really go for a full-on macabre story that's dark, and we can do that. And then we did Oz. We were like, right, we want you to feel like you've been thrown into a digital world. We want you to feel like you are inside a computer game. We want it to be really bright and colourful and stimulating, and we want it to be like a Christmas show that lasts the length a Christmas show would, that has an interval, that's framed as a kind of family Christmas theatre experience. But you know, you realise how much of how we were working before was much harder to do those kind of inquiries, because there was always a commercial pressure of, no, it has to seat this many people, it has to sell this many tickets, there's so many physical considerations in a space. I find it just a really freeing medium. Laura, have you been to see, like, are you sort of digitally engaging with a lot of other theatre stuff?
Yes, I mean, from all kinds of things. So been sort of watching streamed productions, certainly as an early modernist, that was an early part of lockdown, was seeing shows that were being sort of put online. What's been more interesting still has been thinking about shows that are being made online. But as Lucy knows, I have been for the 10 odd years I've been in Oxford a really passionate creation theatre goer. So my experience online has actually been coming to see other shows that you've been making, and that's been really wonderful. And as you say, seeing the distinction, that's been a real strength of creation, that every show looks different, feels different, plays differently, and really experiments in a way that I think is striking, and has also been very influential for Duchess of Malfi. So again, it's very unlike the other plays that you've produced, but it really draws on the knowledge that you've gained through producing them, and certainly kind of uses that expertise that's been gathered, especially, as you say, by a rep company who are now used to working with each other, and play very seamlessly together, and are very collaborative, who are all incredibly forthcoming with ideas and suggestions and ways of working, which has been an absolute treat for me. It's been a complete pleasure, really. I know we're wrapping up, and our time is coming to an end, but I think it might be worth giving a little plug for Duchess of Malfi while we're here. You know, do come and see it if you have the time. But otherwise, yeah, thank you for our chat, Lucy. And I think we're going to hand back over to Wes for further details and introductions. But yeah, thanks for having us, Torch.
Hello, thank you both. Yeah, further details, further intro. Oh, don't disappear. Well, maybe, yeah, just only because it struck me that we could have a 5 minutes of a bridge, really, where I just sort of pick up on some of the things that you've been talking about, because in a way, you've both been so incredibly enthusiastic about this pivot to online. I'm sure there are people here, and maybe even in the next conversation, who might go, no, it's been terrible, and we lose so much and all that. But we'll see. But I suppose there were two, really, I think two questions I wanted to kind of draw out a bit more from you at this stage already. Partly because this connects to the poll result that we've had. So on a personal level, everybody's saying that they're watching less or the same amount of performance online. In other words, it doesn't seem like people have sort of massively invested in doing more online. But there's a split on whether people in general are watching the same amount or more or less, but they seem that it seems it might be a bit less. In other words, for those of us who are used to being part of a theatre making community, and indeed a local theatre making community, I guess my first question to you both might be, haven't we also, even as we're excited, I mean, we are at Torch, we've had incredible numbers globally and all the rest of it, even as we're excited about the global reach, the global access, the Croydon postcodes and the Florida postcodes and all the rest of it, have we also lost something local in the process? Is that a worry, or is the local, do you think, Lucy, when you're doing your numbers, do you think the number of people, let's say, who are coming online are still about the same as you would get locally? Is this all expansion, or is there some loss here as well?
I think it's kind of, our sort of data is showing us that, so we're currently, of all the digital shows, we're currently just tipped over into slightly more than 50% are new digital bookers, and slightly under 50% are people who used to see creation analog shows in the old world. As time goes on, that is, if you look at the data rather than it being a whole year, if you break it down into kind of more recent information, it's kind of actually more dramatic, and we're seeing more and more people who are a digital audience who love digital work, and we're surveying afterwards, and 75% of them are saying, I will continue to see digital work post-pandemic. And there was a big survey by Eventbrite recently where they was coming out with 70% saying they would do digital work post-pandemic. So I'm going to take that to be that our work is 5% better than the average event on Eventbrite. So I think that there's, I think for me, I think actually I think both things are going to be really important. And I think for me, the thing that I feel we all have a responsibility to sort of, can be a bit provocative here in the future, is that it should be community or it should be digital. And the thing that we should be losing is the drive for kind of national touring and national recognition. And I need to take a show to London and I need to tour a show, because really climate change is the massive thing, the big thing we all need to be dealing with. And actually community-based work and local-based work and valuing our local community and our local artists and producing work locally, I think is going to be absolutely essential for the kind of analog arts rebuild and regrowth. But I think alongside that, digital is a really, really exciting way that we can consume culture in a way that could make some really significant steps forward to being more sustainable as an industry.
So you're rebalancing, if you like, or remaking that, the famous activist slogan about the local and the global into, okay, perform locally but disseminate globally, in a way, which I think is really interesting. Obviously, what gets lost in there, again, I'm just thinking about what gets lost, is the regional and the national on some level, or it depends what you think your local is. How big is the local? I think it's we've been having various online discussions with Katie Mitchell as our current visiting fellow over the last few months, and she's been very, very interested in, or is very interested in, precisely this question of, okay, eco dramaturgy, but also, so in other words, not just plays about the climate crisis, but ways of producing theatre that properly interrogate what it is to go on tour, and what it is, what the whole kind of mechanics of taking stuff around the world, or indeed around the country, are about. So there's clearly a lot of thought going into that. If I can turn to Laura for a minute, you talked about, or Lucy mentioned, the exciting early modern online community that there is, and clearly they've picked up a good deal of interest in your work. Again, do you see basically positives in this, as opposed to a kind of loss about, you don't find yourself longing for the seminar in a room somewhere where there's only 20 people, but there's a different form of engagement?
I mean, certainly.
Sorry, yeah.
Yeah, I think, of course, we all miss the different kind of methods of speaking when we're all in person. And certainly, if we were, I don't think I would want us to remain purely in a digital space in terms of sharing work and sharing theatre. But what it's allowing us to do is to basically have conversations across universities in a way that would not ever have been possible. Yep. Certainly, had we, for instance, hypothetically done Duchess of Malfi somewhere in Oxford, I would have brought my students. I'm sure tutors at other colleges would have done the same. It's possible someone from London might have organised a trip, but for the most part, that would be the absolute limits. Yeah. And what has been amazing is being able to say to students around the country, if you want to come and see this, that's no problem. Of course you can, and you're welcome to see this text in action. And it is a text that is widely studied, not just at universities, but at A-level too. So being able to have that kind of shared experience, I think, has been really, really good. And it means that rather than just making something that a few of my students can appreciate, we're making something and then we're able to say, you know, as widely as you would like this, use this in your teaching, in conversations. And it has been really enthusiastically received by early modernists around the country, which has been really gratifying and really lovely to see. So I'm all for the sharing.
Great, thank you. So we've thought then about audiences really in the last 5 minutes on the back of what you've talked about, on the back of your conversation. And the first Slido question was also about us as audience members, the degree to which we have or haven't been engaged with different kinds of online performance. Before I move into the next bit of the seminar, then I want to thank Laura and Lucy very much again for joining in, for letting us listen in to your dialogue. We've got the information about the Duchess of Malfi in the chat, and we'll come back to you in the second half of the event. So thanks very much indeed. Okay, so now we move then to the next bit of our discussion. The further poll is now again, well, it's about to be opened on Slido. We want to hear which artists, which theatres or collectives you've spent most of the time watching. In other words, to focus down a bit more on performers and makers. As you answer, perhaps you could also ask the question, which was sort of raised in what Laura said, about which has been more important to you, kind of live online performance or access to archives of earlier or recorded performance, because clearly one of the things that a lot of theatres have done is put stuff online that otherwise hasn't been available, and that's from, you know, RSC through to the Worcester Group through to all sorts of other groups. So we'd be interested in that as well. But now to our second conversation that we're going to listen in on, and it's between Yasmin Sidhwa, Artistic Director of Mandala Theatre Company, and Ria Parry, Co-Director of Oxford's North Wall Art Centre. And again, I'll wait while the two of you come on screen. Hello both.
Hi.
Mandala Theatre then, again, allow me to say a thing or two about you. I'm sure many people know who you are, but all the same. Mandala Theatre has as its mission the development and the celebration of the power of performance and creativity to change young lives in particular, to build communities and to foster social justice. So this is engaged theatre making of a range of different kinds. Yasmin has in the past few years worked on a number of different knowledge exchange projects with the university and is currently working with the Department of Education through Torch and others on a project about exclusion from school. The North Wall is a long-time friend of Torch from their hosting of Ariane Mnouchkine's Théâtre de Soleil workshops a while back. Ariane still talks longingly about that space as just like Molière's theatre, through to ongoing projects with students, researchers, and other creative partners, more recently under Ria's direction, effectively. The North Wall programme a wide range of performances, usually in this amazing purpose-built art centre in North Oxford, but over the past year, they've also explored in a range of ways, ways to support and promote digital engagement. Over to you then, Yasmin and Ria. I'll disappear again and I'll come back later. Thanks.
Wes. Thanks, Wes. Hi, Yasmin. Lovely to be
Hi,
speaking
Ria.
to you this afternoon. So I'll kick off if that's okay. Just to ask you to talk a little bit about, I suppose, the beginnings of Mandala. I know Wes gave a really good summary there in terms of, I suppose, the reasons for forming the company in the first place, and then fast forwarding to now, whether you feel that the work that you do has changed at all over the last year because of the last year.
Yeah, so I mean, Mandala is all about the voices that are expressed and the stories that are told. That is so important, and who is doing the telling of the stories, because so often there are many voices, especially those from ethnically diverse backgrounds and white working class backgrounds, that aren't heard and aren't told by those people. So Mandala is all about including those voices and putting them on, shining a light on them, and working in a co-creative way with young people. So everything we do is co-created. I think, I mean, it's an interesting one having listened to Lucy and Laura. I mean, obviously our work has changed over the last year because of necessity. It's had to, and it has opened my mind and our minds to other ways of presenting theatre. But I'm not sure that I'm such a great advocate of digital theatre as maybe they are, but I've been really embracing the opportunity to experiment. So in the last year, you know, we've done a lot of panel discussions with young people online. We've done shows online. We've done some creative projects online. And yeah, some of that I probably would have been closed to, because for me, my passion is about people together in a live space and their energy connecting each other. So I think it's, you know, it's been good because it's made me have to think about things in a different way and have to be open. And it's made the way that I work, I think I've made more partnerships, and also we've done quite a lot of organisational development in the last year, which we wouldn't have had time to do. So it's, in some way, yeah, it's, I would say the pandemic has been a place of experiment and growth.
Yeah, great. So maybe let's just focus on a couple of specific projects that I know about, and then you can expand on them. So you've been working on a knowledge exchange project with the Education Department, Oxford University, and Torch as well. So how have you adapted that to online delivery?
Yeah, well, that piece of work, I mean, we did the R&D in the live space and working with a lot of young people over a long period of time. So pupil referral units in Oxford, other schools and colleges, as well as in cities nationally. And then all of this work has been fed by the Excluded Lives team at the Department of Education at Oxford University, who are looking over 4 years at school exclusion in the 4 jurisdictions of the UK, and looking at the differences, the numbers, and what's creating these differences and perspectives. So that is amazing. And then the Humanities Cultural Programme has enabled us to now, and Arts Council England have funded us to create the full production. And we were originally going to tour to Edinburgh, Cardiff, Belfast, and obviously Oxford with the show, a live show that has all come out of research and fed to a writer, Avez Mohammed. And we were going to work with their young programme ambassadors who all have lived experience of school exclusion, and present the show to head teachers and teachers, with the young people being on a panel. So there's a really live, stimulating discussion. So how we're adapting this is we are going to film a version of the play, and it's different to another project I'll tell you about, but this is actually the play version being screened. And obviously I've watched a lot of screened plays, and we will be very much taking into account what the camera can do, but it won't be a film, it will be a screened play. And we will also run workshops online with the young ambassadors rather than in the live space, because they're going to use drama methodology in their research with other young people and talk about exclusion and try out ideas. And then we will screen the performances to the various places so that head teachers and teachers can watch it, and we can have that panel discussion, but it will be online. But we're hoping to, well, we are aiming to be with you at the North Wall on the 8th of June, and it will be live. And, you know, my excitement and passion is that live, but I also am really grateful that we have a way of working with a filmmaker, and we can make the piece really available more widely. And so that is something that from now on, I think all of our work will have that possibility.
Mm-hmm. And there does seem over the last year that there does seem to be some work which has focused on recording theatre performances, very much let's do a recording of a theatre production and make that accessible. And I'd say a lot of the archive work that's come out is in that strand as well. And then there's this other strand of work, which is something might have intentionally been written as a theatre piece, for example, way back when we thought that a production might be possible, but actually companies, artists have adapted in this period to go, oh, actually, how can we communicate this to an audience using the means that we have? How can we do this digitally? And you obviously directed the brilliant Small Hours by Ava Wong Davies last year as a co-production with the Science Festival and Oxford Playhouse, and with Mandala Theatre, obviously, as three co-producers. I just wondered if you could talk a bit about that, particularly from a directing perspective, which kind of fascinates me, because I haven't had the chance, as a director and producer, you know, I haven't had the chance to direct anything for a while, and I've seen the amount of work, obviously, that's kind of gone online. And I look at something like Small Hours, and I really just wanted to be in your room when you were working with the actors, and then working out the edit and all of those things. So how do you direct actors on Zoom?
Well, I would never have said yes to this project because I had some space. I said yes. And that's something for us all to learn from. Say yes, because it's been incredible, like having the chance to work with two partners. So with IF, they were the ones that really pushed for this to happen, and Oxford Playhouse. But Ava was briefed to create this piece that we were going to have to film, not only online, but we were filming actors in Europe. So they were in their rooms, and it was an incredibly collaborative way of working, because sometimes she'd write a scene and we'd come back on and look at it and go, they're not going to be in the same country even. We can't do it like that. So how can we adapt it so that the form works, but the content and the story still works and makes sense? So then we came to this thing that we could film some of it live in outdoor spaces in Oxford. We were also going to have the actors filming themselves on their mobiles, and some of them were filming together on an SLR camera. And then all of this was being edited with the filmmaker and I in conversation. And I wanted this piece to be very physical as well as text-based, because there's a danger that a lot of the work can be text-based. So I was really clear that we would have movement sections that would sort of be then used in its edit form to sort of complement the inner world of the characters and the emotions that were underlying the piece. So I ought to say that this was another piece with Oxford University, because it was the Department of Neurological Sleep Science, and we were looking at, in a way, the effects of COVID on sleep and lack of sleep and on people. So in terms of directing, I mean, we did it in such a short time. I mean, I don't know how we did it, because we literally had a couple of half-day R&D days with the actors on Zoom, and we worked on character and background stuff. and movement. And then it was such a detailed schedule, because while I was working with some of the actors, I was saying they needed to be in a breakout room rehearsing something else or working on their movements. There was never a minute for anybody to stop. But we literally, I directed it over 2 days. Like, this is a full-length piece. And I suppose what was amazing was, in really, my theatre directing lent itself to working with them as characters online, looking at methods, you know, how do you pull back, closing your eyes and trying the speeches, trying to move in a particular way, what are the emotions underlying it, how did we think about where they might be. I mean, the first step was really thinking about it in the storyline and emotional character ideas, and then we brought in the filmmaker to sort of help them. Where's the camera going to be, and how are we thinking about the lighting of it? And that was really important. And then working with the filmmaker over 2 days of editing, you know, it was just sort of talking through. He did a lot of edits and then shared it back, and then I would say this is working or it's not working. I would say it worked well because the actors I've worked with for a long time, they're young actors, they were excited, they were very able in terms of digital technology, but also we trusted each other. So yeah, I mean, I got a massive headache after being on Zoom for like 8 hours a day for 4 days in a row. I literally had to collapse into my bed. So I don't think that was such a good thing, but it was driven by money, you know, how much time and money we had. But ultimately, I think for all of us, it has opened my eyes to possibilities. And I loved directing Small Hours because it was written for screen. It was a play for screen. And I think that is very different to trying, I mean, obviously creation of working with digital, and so they're thinking about it on screen. Whereas for me as well, thinking about how we're filming Though This Be Madness, which is the school exclusion piece, will be really important in terms of edit. The camera will do the work more than, and the edit, but the actors will be in the live space. Whereas for this, the actors had to be really aware of the camera, but obviously then forget it when they were performing, but they were like their technicians at the same time. So it was complicated, but amazingly experimental.
And it's just such beautiful physical sequences in Small Hours. And I think that was, you know, particularly one of those, it was those sections where I think Zoom can actually quite lend itself to directing text. But actually the fact that Arva and yourself had gone, no, there's going to be these moments, let's just do a load of movement, which, you know, is hard enough to get the detail and intricacy of that kind of work when you're in a rehearsal room together, but to kind of communicate that over Zoom, I think, is a particular skill. So congratulations, Yasmin.
Oh, well, thank you. Let's come over to you and ask you how lockdown has affected you at the North Wall.
Good question. So it's been an up and down year, as it has been for, you know, every arts organisation, every venue across the country. We've actually been open for in-person live events whenever we've been allowed to, and that's just something we decided quite early on. So we had a particularly lovely run of shows in the autumn leading up to Christmas, which is a kind of really special period where the entire North Wall staff were running front of house so that we could see shows in and audiences in a COVID secure way. It feels like an age ago now, but that's where we were before Christmas. And then of course we've had a lot of periods where the building has been closed, but that's the building that's been closed, not the organisation that's been closed. So this last year has helped us to think really deeply about access in a really positive way. I think it's made us think about the different ways that we communicate with our audiences and our community, and I suppose the different way that you can offer creative experiences to people. So we've been doing podcasts, we've put gallery exhibitions online, we've been delivering workshops online. We've had a real focus on family activity, actually. So we've been offering free recordings of family shows, children's shows online. It's also made us kind of focus on a different way on the nature of our relationship with our core freelancers, our creative associates. And that's partly to do with responding to wanting to support them and the ideas that our core freelancers have, and also acknowledging the time that we're in. So, for example, we have the Alchemy Festival coming up, which is our annual New Work Festival, and it normally happens across 3 days in the building, buzzing, lots of activity. Of course, this year it will be fully digital. Alchemy will be a digital festival, and we've just gone for it. So we've worked with, or we are working with the Pappy Show to do a short film. We're working with Ad Infinitum to do a podcast series. We're working with Marika McKennell to do some audio plays, and Ellie Keel, and Poltergeist, I think, are going to be making an online game, which at the moment I'm like, they're much more tech savvy than me, but you know, that's probably going to be part of the festival too. So it's all very it's all very exciting. And the North Wall will be open again for in-person live events as soon as we're allowed to. But I also absolutely reflect back on the last year and see the real positivity that's come from digital engagement. And it definitely feels like that is a strand that is here to stay.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've really seen, and I know other freelance artists and companies have really felt like the North Wall is a yes, can do place. And I want to really honour you with that, because it really makes a difference, I think, to companies that don't have a base, or freelance artists that don't have spaces. So I just wondered, what do you think, how do you think theatre makers have responded to the challenge to create online?
Brilliantly, beautifully, inventively. I mean, you give a problem to artists, and it's not a problem, is it? It's a challenge, and then artists take a challenge and put a load of graft and talent in the mix, and then suddenly it turns into something extraordinary and beautiful and brilliant. So amazingly, really, I know lots of artists who have become skilled at making digital work over the last year in a way that they never were before, but they've done that because you know, the best artists are storytellers. We're storytellers, and in this last year, people have wanted to continue working out how to communicate stories, and have used whatever means they have to do that. And also, just returning to access for a second, I think a really positive thing that has happened is the availability of particular work, and there are some really good plays, good productions that I've been aware of from, say, like 2019, that kind of came and went, but are suddenly available again for people to access, and that is good. So a couple of my favorites at the moment are Typical by Ryan Calais Cameron. That's Nouvelle Riche, directed by Anastasia Osakafor. That was at the Edinburgh Festival in 2019, performed by Richard Blackwood, and Soho Theatre is streaming it at the moment. Fantastic. And then one of my favourite plays of 2019 was Shook by Sam Bailey, produced by Papa Tango, and they were going to transfer to the West End, where, of course, tickets would be expensive because that's the West End, but they have that was all cancelled, and so they decided to film a performance of it, and now it's streaming worldwide and doing brilliantly, and it's totally a play that everyone should see. So some, you know, very positive things have come from artists just saying, how do we make this work?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's what artists will never be stopped, and theatre makers will never be stopped, because we have stories we need to tell. And that's why Mandala formed, and it's what you do, Ria. I just wanted to finally ask you, what do you think for the future of theatre because of what's happened in the last year? How are you feeling about that? And obviously having to run a venue and how it's affected you. What's your take for the future?
I mean, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this too, Yasmin. I think if I speak kind of more widely than the North Wall, if we kind of look at what's happened to the sector over the last year, I mean, it's been absolutely battered, really, financially, practically, emotionally, and it continues to need a lot of support to survive and recover. What I would also say, though, is, and I know we've spoken about this in a lot of conversations offline, that the last year has highlighted huge structural inequalities in our sector. And if we look at the kind of wave of redundancies that hit many organizations over the last year, and then the exodus of freelancers, which is still happening because of the lack of work and the little support, this kind of thing changes the face of the industry in a terrible way. So there is a huge amount of work for all of us to do to make sure that this isn't permanent. But because, an arts sector that doesn't have diversity and inclusion at its heart is just a club.
Yeah.
So,
well, absolutely. And I mean, if I talk about this as well, I mean, I think, again, stories will be told, but if you don't have access to the funding, and you don't have access to the space, and you don't have places where your stories can be seen, it becomes a voice that is silenced. And so I feel like there's been really positives, because the cultural organisations in Oxford have been coming together and really looking at representation, at leadership, at recruitment, at language, in terms of the voices and representation of people from ethnically diverse, and as we're calling them, the global majority. And I feel that I felt so connected with cultural organisations in Oxford and more nationally on this conversation than I ever have before. And it has come out of the Black Lives Matter movement. Obviously we've done a lot of work with young people on creative stuff and responses to the Black Lives Matter movement. But I've really felt like there's a real desire and a will to change the systemic racial problems. They are, it's not about individuals or organizations in itself. It is really big. And I just want us to go forward into the future of stories, and stories being seen in whatever form, whether they're digital or theatre in the live space, where they are equally important to everything else, and that we look at what are the barriers, what is the reality, because we know that to survive in theatre, a lot of people have to have backup from family, and if you don't have that, that makes you step out. And obviously with the young people we work with, that's where we always tour to schools and colleges as well as venues, because if you don't, those young people will never see theatre, and they'll believe that it's not for them anymore, or never ever was for them. So I mean, I just want to finally finish. It's an interesting one, harking back to Lucy and Laura, because I think theatre does have to be local, but also I would want to take it to other places. But maybe it's about selecting much smaller tours where you're held with a group of venues for a longer period of time, so there's not as much traveling around. There's a way of traveling on trains, or so that we're not doing as much to harm the environment. So I do think that we need to think in that wider context, but I can never say let's not be in the live space. There is nothing that compares to sharing that emotional energy with other people next to you. So I'm praying we get to do that really soon. But yeah, thanks, Ria.
Thanks, Yasmin. Lovely to speak with you. I think Wes is back.
Yeah,
I am, although I've somehow lost my own. Okay, there we are. I am. Thanks very much, both of you, for that. Again, really, really interesting, wide-ranging and engaged discussion. I'm not surprised, Yaz, that you were going to end on the, I want to get back in the room where it happens. The Zoom where it happens doesn't do it for you to the same degree, but I mean, clearly both of you have, I mean, I was also very struck by both of you saying this has been a time of experiment, of growth, and of learning to say yes to stuff that you might otherwise not have ever got engaged with. And I think that's a really big learning thing for all of us. I think the other thing I'd like to just sort of spend a minute or two thinking about on the back of your conversation, partly because it's also very strongly the case in the university, is the kind of, I don't like this term, so I'm half loath to say it at all, but it's doing a certain kind of job, so I'll say it anyway. And that is the sort of potential for a lost generation here. In other words, a group of young researchers in our case, but young theatre makers in your case, who precisely risk, because of all the access work, all the other work that we've been doing over the last 10, 20 years, this generation risk losing out because the next 5 to 10 years are going to be so tough in terms of sustaining a life in the theatre. It seems to me that that's a problem that's in the theatre, that's in the university sector, that's in a kind of wide-ranging set of cultural forms. What do we do about it?
Well, for me, I mean, we just have to make available the time. I mean, I think, yes, that people are going to say, where's the money, where's the support? But actually, there is, if there's the will, it's redirecting money, and it is going into schools, and schools being allowed to have a curriculum that is free flowing. Let's, this whole thing about they're being damaged because they're not going to pass exams. In a way, the exams system is not really, it's stressing them out because there's so much sort of connected to whether you pass or fail rather than what your learning is. And I think it's the same with research. If young people really knew what research meant and you were given space and time to take that out, I think there wouldn't be a lost generation. It's about what do we want to leave or give over to the next generation. Ria, I'm sure you've got some amazing
three practical things which are kind of very much in my head at the moment, because I totally hear what you're saying, Wes, and it's very, it's true of all the drama schools, it's true of all the art subjects. Young people I'm in contact with who graduated last year or graduating this year, people are scared. People are, built up to a point where they're graduating 21, like this is supposed to be it. Launch in, it's supposed to be such an exciting time. It's supposed to be one of the most positive moments, rather than 10 years later where you're going, do I still want to be here or whatever? This is supposed to be the time, and it's been taken away from so many people. And so I suppose I'm quite a pragmatic person, and it's the only way that I can get through. So I think mentorship is key, that anyone who is in a position that can offer more time to mentor kind of young people, early career artists, I suppose the people that we generally connect with at the North Wall, I think that has to be given. I think there's something about opportunities being as accessible as possible. Now, this has always been like a drum that I've been banging on, but actually there shouldn't be closed doors on opportunities. We need to really, really make sure that they're getting to as kind of a wider range as possible. And we need to get money to freelancers. I know I was fascinated to hear that you're going to be doing another session in the future about freelancers, but freelancers from people who've been in the industry 10 years to 6 months. You know, actually it's the people who graduated last year that really need to be told that the industry values them, that really need to be told that actually we're going to give you money to R&D a show, or come and do a Q&A, or whatever we can. Any organizations that have money that can be channeled to freelancers to kind of keep people going, both on a practical level but on a creative level as well, that has to be a priority.
Thank you. I've asked Laura and Lucy to come back because we've only got about 5 more minutes of this particular bit of the seminar, and there's one question that's come through, and I wondered if you might all ponder it and say a minute or two what you think. So the question is from Jonathan, and it's: what advice could Creation and Mandala offer to larger, better funded national theatres, touring companies and regional reps that have rarely, if at all, attempted to make online theatre beyond broadcasting live on stage shows and films of older productions? In other words, yeah, how do you help the people apparently higher up than you in the food chain, better resourced and so on, but what can we teach them?
It's a great question and quite a hard one to answer. I think I would like to say, just give it a go. Just don't be scared. Just get into, you know, start making a piece of digital work and play and explore in the same way that you would do in a rehearsal room, and kind of see it as a creative challenge. And it comes with a set of limitations, but embrace those. And you know, I think it's a difficult time for I think, you know, the larger the organization, almost the harder it is, because, you know, if you are running a big building, you have a lot of just how you manage that with constant rolling, we're open, we're shut, and cancellations, and managing big teams, and your overheads are much higher. And so, you know, I have enormous sympathy for what that challenge is. We've been invited into a lot of we've, you know, like I probably spend a day a week these days either helping other organizations or PhD students with mentoring or webinars or meetings about how you do digital work. And I've really noticed that it's massively increased in the last 2 months, people asking for us for that help and saying, we're making a digital show, can you come in and can you talk to the tech team? And actually what you realise when you're brought in is it's often quite embarrassing, because there's a tech team there who actually do know how to do it, and they don't need advice on how to do it, and they can work out how to plug in a camera and how to light a piece of digital work, and it's not difficult. And you know, all those skills are in-house, and maybe there's a bit of resistance in-house to trying it or to embracing it, or maybe it's just that confidence is needed to give it a go.
Yes, do you want to say something about this, and then I'll move to Ria? And
yeah, I mean, for me, I think if you're a big organization with you know, obviously you're struggling as well, but I would say use it as an experimental time. Bring in the voices that you haven't heard before. Bring in playwrights that are willing to give it a go, that is writing for the digital space, because I think that's the difference to making something really successful. And be really open to saying, you know, this is a new way of thinking, a new way of experimenting with telling stories. And then I think everybody, your audiences, will accept it, because, and whether you do it in a festival context, it would be, I think, a wonderful way to open doors to wider diversity.
Before Ria comes, thanks, Yasmin. I've just realised that Laura has to disappear, go off and do other stuff in a second. So, Laura, do you want to either just say goodbye or else add to this debate quickly before you go?
Yes, I mean, very quickly, I'm jumping over into rehearsals, but absolutely. I think one thing we've been doing, well, we've been making Duchess of Malfi, which maybe other companies and spaces could think about too, is we've been documenting the process. So we've been recording rehearsals, we've been making videos, just basically thinking out loud in a way that creates hopefully a kind of a legacy or the start of an archive about this. And that would certainly be my 2 cents about what companies could do, even if they're experimenting and they're not putting on shows. Thinking out loud and recording that, I think, is crucial, and certainly has been an important part of Lucy and I's work as we've been thinking about Duchess. Speaking of, yes, I am going to jump off, but thank you so much for having me, and for all the speakers. That was fascinating.
Thank you, Laura. Ria, can we save up your thoughts on this for the next bit? Just because I think there's others who also have to leave. So that's it for the first section of this webinar. In a moment, we'll be moving over to a Zoom meeting for an informal post-show discussion where we can explore these themes further. Is it clear to everybody here, Ruth, how they move to that meeting? I'm hoping it is. Do join us if you can, and come along, whether you're a maker yourself in some way that we haven't yet talked about, for example, set design or sound design and so on, or whether you're interested as an audience member or indeed a researcher into the history or the making of theatre. Instructions for how to join have just appeared, I think. Yep, there they are. And if you have to leave now, we hope you'll join us again for our next webinar on the 29th of April. Details again will be shared in the chat and will be on the website at Torch. Before we end this bit, then, many thanks again to all four of our dialogists, our speakers today. Thank you to all of you for joining us, and special thanks to Ruth Moore, our theatres officer here at Torch, for making all this possible, and also for Maya, to also behind the scenes in the Torch bit of the world. Maya wears several different hats, comms and also technical hats here. So I'll see you shortly when you follow the link to our post-show discussion. If you have to go off and get a glass of water or something else in the meantime, please do. We'll be back in 2 or 3 minutes in the other Zoom room. Thanks very much indeed. Goodbye.